Well, good morning again. We are in week 3 of a 3-week sermon series. It's called Spring Cleaning. I don't know how many of you have actually been engaged in any spring cleaning at home, but 'tis the season. We had talked about in the first week how, generally speaking, there is a rule that a lot of people practice when it comes to doing some house cleaning, and it is to make your 3 piles. Your keep pile, and we talked 2 weeks ago about the things that we keep, the things that are important to us, things that are sacred to us. Last week, Stephen talked about the throwaway pile or the purging pile, right? And then today, it's the giveaway pile that we want to talk about. When it comes to giving away, certainly a very biblical idea, but even if we go back to the beginning of the Bible, we find that there's a struggle with this idea of giving away. It's interesting because when we look at the scriptures and how they start off in the book of Genesis, we have this great story of creation. And from the beginning, there is plenty. There is enough. There is enough to feed those who are inhabitants of the garden. There is enough for all of the animals. There is enough for shelter, and there is enough for sustenance, right? There is enough. But it doesn't take too long before there's a concern about wanting more. And so there's the temptation to take of the thing that they are told not to take from. Not because they need it, but because they want it. Right? And then we move a little bit later, and then another one of the great examples of when we kind of move very much into a scarcity kind of perspective on things is during the Exodus. And you may remember that God has, through Moses' leadership, delivered the Israelites. They have gone through the Red Sea or through the Sea of Reeds. They have reached the other side. Pharaoh's army is now left in their wake, and they make their way into the wilderness where they will spend the next 40 years, where they have, guess what? Enough. God provides. And even though they have this ration of food every day called manna, which is enough to keep every single person alive and full, they already run into problems of people wanting to take more than their fair share because they are concerned that at some point there may not be enough. And so this accumulation continues to be a part of things. And we try to share, and we try to give, and we try to give more than we need when we have excess. And sometimes that's a tricky thing for us to wrap our heads around. I remember a couple of years ago, I ran into this challenge. I was in the drive-through line at a Chick-fil-A, and this was 10 years ago or so. And it still happens from time to time, but it was happening a lot more back then, like the pay it forward thing. You ever been caught in one of these drive-thrus or at the coffee shop, and the person in front of you pays for your order, and you get to the register and they said, oh, well, the person ahead of you paid for you. They paid it forward, and then that's great. And then you're in a spot where you have a decision to make, right? That's cool, free chicken. Or, you know what? I'm going to continue to pay it forward, right? And if you're really unlucky, they'll tell you in the drive-thru, you're number 34, right? And then you feel like there's even more of an obligation to continue the thing forward. And I said, you know what? That's great. I'll pay it forward for the car behind me. I inch up, and I'm moving closer to the window where I'm going to have to give them my credit card. And I look into the rearview mirror, and there's one of those 15-passenger church vans. I'm like, this is going to be a $240 drive-through order. And immediately, all of my generosity and my kind spirit and the desire to have 35 cars strong going through that drive-through, paying it forward, that dried up quickly. Now, I know you're curious, and I'm going to tell you it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But I was struck as I drove away that all of a sudden I didn't feel so good about myself. In that moment, I was happy to be generous to a point. And it was at no point like I was not going to be able to pay the bills that month because of the car behind me. And yet, I had an idea in my head about what my generosity ceiling was going to be, right? Because I wanted to make sure that I had enough. And of course I had enough, but immediately I moved into that scarcity way of thinking. I bring this up because this is a challenge, I think, when many of us are doing that spring cleaning. If I give it away, will I have enough? If I get rid of it, it's gone forever. Will I need it again? So I hold on to it, right? We hold on to things for some of the wrong reasons. Stephen did a great job in talking to us about the purging last week. But what about this give it away? And what about the giving it away when there's actually some value to it, right? It's one thing to give away something that I don't need it, I don't want it, I want it gone. That's a very different kind of giving away than I still think this has value. I could use this again, but honestly, this might benefit somebody else more. It's like Stephen was talking about last week with that high chair. Getting rid of that made sense because it might actually be useful to someone else, or getting rid of a stroller might help somebody else even if you don't need it right now. Like that kind of way of thinking. The story that we base this whole sermon series on is a story about King Josiah. We touched on him the last 2 weeks. Let me just remind you about what happened. Josiah is now in a line of kings who have been pretty much an utter and complete failure. They have been evil kings, they have been harmful, they have led the people astray. Things have gone off the rails. And Josiah seems to be cut from a different cloth. He seems to be one of the good kings. And so he says, you know what? There have been a lot of our people, our tradespeople, our stonemasons, our carpenters. They have been working really hard and done an amazing job in helping construct our temple facilities. And so he sends his servant, he sends his right-hand man, he says, go into the treasury and pay them. Whatever they say they are owed, pay them. You don't need to collect receipts. We're going to trust them. These are honorable people, and they deserve to be compensated. Go pay them. And after he pays all of these workers, all of their fair wages, lo and behold, under the pile of the coins, they discover the law of Moses. They discover what was probably an early version of the book of Deuteronomy. And the blessing is that they recover the law, and they begin to enact the practices of the law again, and thus sets in motion a period of reform for Josiah's kingdom. This is a new day, a new chapter for the people. Things are going to be good again. We are going to get right with each other. We are going to get right and restore the relationship that has been distanced with God, and we're going to turn a corner here in this kingdom, in this reign of King Josiah. But it also strikes me that this story, what often gets overlooked in here, is an important detail, because we focus on the thing that feels like the wow factor thing. And the wow factor thing in this story is, wow, they discovered the law. And we'll reinstitute the practices of the law, and we will learn how to live in right relationship with one another and with our God once again. And we're off and running. And that's where the story takes over. But let's not forget that it was only because of Josiah's generosity and his desire to give something away that the blessing of rediscovering the law became apparent. In other words, if he wouldn't have been generous, if he wouldn't have tried to give away all of that great treasury, they would have never uncovered the law. It would have been buried. One blessing to another leads to a greater blessing with the people. There's a lot of biblical stories. In fact, I talked to the youth on Wednesday night about this. But there are so many biblical stories where we get so enamored with the shiny thing, the thing in the story that's the wow moment, that we sometimes overlook a really important secondary idea, or maybe even it's the main idea, but we lose perspective on it. Let me give you an example. John's Gospel tells the story of the feeding of the 5,000 that I read a little bit ago. The feeding of the 5,000, most of the time when we hear this story, including for many of us when we heard this as children, the wow factor is what? It's the miracle, right? These loaves and fishes were multiplied and they served 5,000 people, and John goes to the extra effort to say, and there were lots of leftovers, gang. And so that's the part, it's the takeaway, right? Jesus is performing a miracle. Amazing. He does this over and over again, and he performs miracles. And in John's gospel, he even says, hey, don't tell anybody about it. Which to me seems to suggest that Jesus says, don't get lost in the miracle and forget about the message. If we look to what the message is in the story of the feeding of the 5,000, is it really that Jesus has supernatural abilities to multiply food? That doesn't feel like the big takeaway, does it? That's the wow factor, that's the sparkle on it. But isn't the story about the generosity of a boy who offers everything he has, and Jesus says, this will be enough? Isn't this story's bigger message about everybody who approaches Jesus will walk away satisfied? Isn't the message here that those who hunger and thirst, whatever they're hungering and thirsting for, and when they come to Jesus, that Jesus does not turn his back on them? I think those are the points of the story, right? That's the message. And so if we're looking at this from a generosity standpoint, what we have here is a story about Jesus making enough. And when somebody offers something, Jesus is able to multiply and transform that blessing into enough that everybody walks away feeling like they have been fed or fed, right? We can apply the same lesson to the communion table. If we read the story of Jesus at the Last Supper, breaking the bread and passing the cup around, and we get caught up in saying, well, is it really body, and is it really blood, and is it just symbols? The church has debated that for centuries. But isn't the bigger point about what Jesus is saying, I am offering myself completely to you? What I am offering here is a sacrificial gift. What this is an extension of my love and my grace to you. And what we celebrate is that all are welcome to come to the table, as if the feeding of the 5,000 was a precursor to it, which says there will always be enough for everyone who comes to the table. That's what this is about. When we live in such a way that we practice scarcity, we are missing out on the opportunity to unlock blessings. Most of you have had the experience, sometimes, many times, perhaps always, of when you are generous, that there is a blessing involved. Not as a quid pro quo, right? Not as an obligatory thing, not transactional, and not a prosperity gospel kind of thing, like give away $100 and thousands more will come back to you. It's not transactional. It's about a peace. It's about a blessing. It's about something that comes over us that we all have experienced. That when we are generous, sometimes in mysterious and unforeseen ways, there is a blessing that comes out of that. But not if we approach that kind of generosity as in checking the rearview mirror for who's behind me in the Chick-fil-A line kind of way, right? That had a string attached. That had a footnote. There was an asterisk beside that generosity. But when we live in such a way that we take stock of our lives, we take an inventory and we say, these are the things that are sacred, these are the things that are important, these are the things in my keep pile. These are the things that I can cast aside. These are the things I don't need anymore. These are purged. But then there's these things that fit into that in-between category. Where do I have enough to share? Where can I be a blessing? Where out of the abundance and the grace and the blessings that I receive, can I share these and be a blessing to others? Sometimes that comes in the form of time. Sometimes that comes in the form of service. Sometimes that comes in the form of monetary gifts. Sometimes that comes in simple acts of kindness, a phone call, a hug, a well-timed text message. But giving of ourselves to others, as Josiah points out, as the boy on the hillside that day pointed out, as Jesus at the table with his disciples reminds us, that sometimes the sharing of ourselves and the giving away unlocks blessings that we could never imagine. As we prepare to come to the table today, there will be enough. There will be enough for all of us to come to be fed and to walk away satisfied. May this gift that Christ freely offers us be sustenance for us as we seek to give ourselves for others. Let us pray.